Ah, it's getting to that time of the year, ladies and gentlemen. The Christmas cheer is in the air, the Game Awards are over and done with, and every YouTuber under the sun is doing their own top 10 best games of the year videos. And now it's time for everyone's favourite YouTuber, me, to join the bandwagon. Okay, maybe I'm not everyone's favourite YouTuber, that's besides the point. Anyway, before we properly get into the video, I need to state some rules and regulations. First off, the games on this list don't need to be games that were released in 2025, they just need to be games that I have played in 2025. In fact, I don't think I've actually played a game this year that has actually been released this year. If you're wondering why that is the case, it's because of how damn expensive some newer games are getting. This mainly applies to AAA games, but when people talk about the recent push for game studios to change game prices from $60 to $70, and then the more recent price push to $90 by some companies, they forget to mention that they're using USD as their currency. Whereas in my country of the great land down under, games have gone from being around $70 to $80 to jumping up to anywhere between $90 and $120. This subject could be worthy of its own separate video, but the TLDR of it is I'm essentially being priced out of most modern AAA games, which is why you'll mostly be seeing older games in this video. And second, there will be no repeats of series in this list. For example, I can't just put 2 Halo games in the list, it has to be one or the other. Let's start off with some honourable mentions. It genuinely was hard to figure out which games I was going to put in this list, as I've actually played a lot of good games this year, but Crash Bandicoot 2 just barely missed being in my top 10. I think Crash 2 is by far the best in the series, and it's also a very special game to me, as I'm 90% certain that this may be my first or second game I ever played. Now, whilst I do love this game, it does have its downsides. The well-known depth perception issues the game has can make platforming annoying at times, and this game's last 5 levels and final boss fight are a steep drop off in quality from the rest of the game in my opinion, with enemies that have janky hitboxes and levels centered around very hard to control jetpack. This jetpack controls like absolute dog shit, and I remember always giving up on these levels as a kid and starting the game over to enjoy the more fun levels at the beginning of the game. Crash 2 is also where I felt the series was really establishing its own unique identity, as I felt the first game had borrowed a lot of tropes from other platformers, whereas in Crash 2 I can't really give it any comparisons to any other platformer. A very solid game and only barely missed being in the list because as I've gotten older my tastes have changed and there are games that I just enjoyed slightly more this year. Which leads me on to my second and final honourable mention, Demon's Souls' remake. Fuck's sake, I'm just gonna call it Demon's Souls like everyone else. I don't really have much to say on why this game didn't make the list. This was From Software's first go at a Souls-like and the first Souls-like in general, meaning that they made a lot of mistakes that later entries would improve upon. The main example I can think of is all the gimmick fights in the game. There are a lot of bosses in Demon's Souls that have some sort of annoying gimmick to them that I know a lot of people, myself included, didn't like. Thankfully, they would essentially do the complete opposite for their future games, only have 1 or 2 gimmick bosses throughout the game rather than 50% of them being gimmicks. And whilst I haven't played the original, I think that these issues in the remake would transfer over anyway. Moving on to a game that actually made it on the list, at number 10 we have Sleeping Dogs. It is absolutely criminal that this game never got a sequel. This genuinely is one of the most unique games I've played, with an amazing story and mixing GTA's cover shooting and driving with the Batman Arkham game's melee combat. Whilst the driving and shooting felt very generic, this game had good bones to build upon, and it really makes me wonder what they could have done for a sequel. I always imagined a sequel to this game would look like a John Wick movie, where you're in melee combat but are able to periodically shoot at enemies from across the room with the hit of a button. Oh man. How good a sequel to this game could have been. But nonetheless, this game is amazing and one of my favourite open world games ever. Coming in at number 9, I have Dishonored. Dishonored genuinely shocked me on my playthrough, as I was never really a fan of the immersive sim genre until I played this game a couple of months ago. The fact that this game manages to both be linear but very open in the way you complete missions was a breath of fresh air in a market where more modern games want to push you down a more linear path. I remember playing this game initially as a teenager and not really understanding the hype around it, but I guess as time moves on my tastes have changed and now this game is right up my alley. Dishonored has opened my eyes to a whole new genre of games that I haven't explored yet, and I will definitely be playing the second one in the near future. At number 8 we have The Evil Within, probably one of my favourite survival horrors. I'm sure you could argue there are objectively better survival horrors, but this game's world and atmosphere is unmatched in my opinion. So unmatched that I don't even think the second game lives up to it. The world and lore in this game is amazing, especially combined with this blend of survival horror and stealth. I'm pretty sure this game was my first survival horror ever. I probably initially played it when I was around 10 years old. I remember it scaring the shit out of me back then, and ever since this genre has been a massive favourite of mine. For number 7, I put F.E.A.R. Now, I played this legendary shooter for the first time ever this year, and I can certainly see why it is so legendary. The world and atmosphere gives me similar vibes to The Evil Within's, but the main selling point for this game is its gameplay. The slow motion bullet time, the shooting, and the really fun and unique melee system just works so amazingly well together. This game would probably be a bit high if it wasn't for some modern PC parts not being super compatible with the game and its reliance on fan-made mods to get it in an actual playable state. This game could definitely do with a light remaster where they fix these issues and don't touch anything else about the game because it's perfect otherwise. This game also has some of the best lighting effects I've seen in a game. Seriously, some of these areas outdo modern ray tracing. Moving on to number 6, Sifu. Much like Dishonored and F.E.A.R, this was another game I played for the first time ever this year, and it blew me away. This game has Batman Arkham style combat, but without the hand-holding those games give you for blocking and parrying attacks. Because of this lack of hand-holding, a lot of people gave this game the Souls-like tag, which, I mean, it really isn't. However, the lack of hand-holding is very similar to Souls-like game design, which I really like. Combat in this game is literally just up to your pure skill. The story is also really good, with its dark, brooding atmosphere complementing the gameplay very well. Coming down to the last 5 now, I constantly change these games' orders around even as I write the script for this video. But anyway, number 5 is the Dead Space remake. Although story-wise I prefer the original game, this game is just everything you want in a remake. Being a huge Dead Space fan, I was really happy to see something new that was Dead Space related, and unlike a certain spiritual successor to Dead Space, this game actually worked on launch and had no major game-breaking bugs. At number 4 we have Red Dead Redemption 2. I absolutely loved every minute with this game, and it was in fact the first ever game that I did an analysis video on. There's not much to be said about this game that hasn't been said before. Arthur Morgan is a top 10 main character of all time, and in fact this game has a top 10 ensemble cast of all time. All these characters are amazing to interact with, and it doesn't fall into mistakes that a lot of stories with this many characters do, where you just don't really have enough time or the writing isn't good enough to care about them. Story-wise, Rockstar knocked this one out of the park, however gameplay-wise there are some flaws. Rockstar's dedication to making this game as realistic as possible sometimes works to their detriment rather than their favour. For example, with horses, they don't just act like vehicles, they behave like an actual animal with self-preservation and basic thinking skills. A good example of this is if you're riding your horse straight to a cliff edge. The horse will sometimes stop you from falling over the ledge because the horse doesn't want to die. The horse behaving this way in this example is completely fine and makes sense, as it helps to ensure the player doesn't accidentally walk off a cliff whilst on their horse. However, where the horse's self-preservation is annoying is when trying to dodge a large obstacle such as a tree. To better explain myself, I have made a lovely sketch in Microsoft Paint. Let's say for example you're galloping on your horse and a pesky tree is in your way. You decide to go left around the tree, so you hold your analog stick to the left. But your horse's AI decides it wants to go right around the tree. Your button inputs and your horse's AI are now conflicting, and you end up just running straight into the fucking tree anyway. If it weren't for this issue and similar issues like this, which I'm not going to bother listing because it would just be really boring going over every minor complaint in this game, I'd probably give this the number 3 slot. Speaking of slot number 3, we have The Last of Us. Whilst not having an ensemble cast like Red Dead, this game's storytelling and the way it treats its characters is just as good. The Last of Us is especially good at making you care about characters very quickly, such as Joel's daughter in the prologue. The only reason this is above Red Dead is because of the gameplay. Like I said in my video for the game, I genuinely had no issues with it. It's all around a really solid game. Still pissed off about them getting rid of the ability to make Joel shake his booty though. The game's literally ungoonable now. In number 2, I have put the GOAT, Halo Combat Evolved. At the time of writing this, I haven't released my video on it yet, so if you want to see a more in-depth review of this game, keep an eye out on my future uploads. Anyway, Combat Evolved did a lot for shooters when it was released, especially for console shooters. And outside of just shooters, Halo pretty much came up with most of the standardized controls you see in all different games now. Other than that, gameplay-wise, it still holds up really well to this day, with some minor flaws that don't really take away from the gameplay that much, and most consider these to be more features than bugs or glitches anyway. Story-wise, it holds up just as well, and although obviously Halo 5 has the best story of the entire series, this is a very close second. That was rage bait, by the way. In all seriousness though, Combat Evolved does have one of the best stories in the franchise, and especially for a game where they weren't even sure if they were going to make a sequel to it, they don't over or undercommit. If Halo never got a sequel, this story would be a good ending for the series. However, they still do leave hints of there being more to this story with Master Chief's cryptic ending line. All around, an amazing game for one of my favourite series of games. Moving on to number 1 now, we have Dark Souls 1. Now, I know what people who don't agree with my placement on this game are going to say, and sure, purely from an objective and game design standpoint, Dark Souls is worse than some of these games. People are probably going to point out areas in this game like Lost Izalith, which I agree are notoriously bad and unfinished areas, and say, how does this beat Halo, The Last of Us, and Red Dead 2? Well, for one, it's my list and I'm biased as fuck, so fuck you. And 2, this game really came around at the right time for me. It was my first Souls-like I ever played, and when I played it, I was not in a very happy point in my life. I don't want this to become another Dark Souls save me video, but it really did. And since I played it, I have been hooked on this genre, and it has quickly become my favourite genre of game to play. Story-wise, this game's deep and hidden lore has always fascinated me even years before I played it, and the gameplay, whilst being hard, is on the most part fair, and with some game knowledge, subsequent playthroughs can be very fun, especially when experimenting with new builds. Anyway, this was my best games I played in 2025. I will of course be following up with a worst games I've played this year soon, but that may not be for another couple of weeks as it's getting close to Christmas, and much like most other people, I'm going to be pretty busy over the holiday season. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. Bye.